Welcome to the Lighthouse Conversations, a show featuring entrepreneurs and tastemakers from the worlds of art, culture, tech, and of course food. I'm your host, Hashem and Mounir. Today we're talking tech, specifically FinTech, with our guest Mounir Nakhla, the co-founder of Egyptian startup Halan. Halan started out as a ride-sharing platform specifically for 2- and 3-wheelers, but they've since pivoted to a financial processing backbone comprising of a digital wallet, bill payments, e-commerce with buy now, pay later, known as BNPL, as well as issuing consumer loans. Since Mounir is based out of Cairo, we jumped on a Zoom call to talk about what motivated him to take his company through a major pivot, as well as what he's like as a leader, discussing both his strengths and weaknesses. Mounir, a pleasure to have you here on the podcast. This is my second attempt to pin you down, so I'm glad I was successful this time.
I'm so happy we made it, Hashem, and I'd do anything for you. Yeah.
Allah Rabbana khalik. You're very kind. Look, I'm going to jump right in because we have a lot to cover, and you're a busy man. While I was preparing for this podcast, the first thought that came to my mind was a couple of years ago, actually pre-COVID. I remember seeing you at the Lighthouse. You were coming to Dubai for a couple of days and having a quick meal before you go to one of your venture capital meetings. And at the time, the focus was on doing essentially the Uber of tuk-tuks, so to speak. And you were excited about it, and you, in fact, raised some money around it. It was very successful. Fast forward COVID, and a few years later, and now you have a super app with many different pieces that have brought you to where you are. First of all, congratulations. I mean, you guys have clearly have been very busy, have gotten a lot done. I'm using that example because I think it gives us a starting point, perhaps to start from and to where you're going. My first question to you is, how did you land from essentially what was a mobility play to today what looks more like a FinTech / mobility / super app? How did that happen?
So I remember that day at the Lighthouse, and I was very eager to raise a few $1 million, and successfully we managed to do so at the time. My story starts with a background in lending, microfinance, SME development, but mostly lending, and with a big focus on the unbanked population. And I had established a few companies in 2010 and 2014 that focused on consumer financing and business loans. In 2017, I got approached by one of the seed investors of Gojek, which was then a $1 billion company. And he told me, Gojek is a unicorn and your companies are worth a fraction of that.
Can you just, Mounir, to interrupt you, just for the audience, can you give us a background? Where is the company? Because it's not here in our region.
So Gojek is in Indonesia.
Yeah.
It merged with Tokopedia, and now it's valued at $30 billion combined. So it's a big success. Back then, it had just hit the unicorn status. And they started off doing ride hailing with 2- and 3-wheelers. I was selling 25% of Egypt's 3-wheelers at the time, and I thought, okay, it might make sense to invest in technology. Technology was very clear that it was the path of the future. Operational scalability, machine learning, AI, automated decisions, instant gratification for users. So there was a lot that came with investment in technology. I don't have any background in technology. So the first course of action back in 2017 was to find a partner, a co-founder who is also a CTO. And very successfully, I met Ahmed Mohsen, who is one of the most talented engineers in Egypt and possibly in the region. I tried to pitch to him the idea of ride hailing. He thought that most of the underserved communities wouldn't have a mobile phone. But successfully, I managed to convince him, and we launched Halan as a ride hailing company. By 2019, I had realized that it was very tough to nail the unit economics. It was, I couldn't see a path to profitability with the ride hailing. And some of the biggest companies in the world are still losing billions of dollars.
I was going to get to that. So that problem, I mean, we have obviously very big success story here in the region of Uber acquiring Careem. And up until today, even at the Uber holdco level, there are still question marks whether this model on unit economics can actually work standalone. Now, if you pack in other things, maybe. So was that something you recognized at the individual level in terms of Halan? I just want to kind of, your typical founder is a bit optimistic. So was your instinct, I don't think the economics of this thing can work and therefore we need to think broader? Or was the point, you know what, let me just try to scale it right as fast as I can and see what happens?
So we were scaling. We had reached millions and millions of rides per month. So scaling was
not
no issue. Not an issue. But the minute I put the brakes on the driver incentives, or the minute I do a price increase, the numbers were slashed by double-digit percentages. And that was too much, which basically meant that the user and the driver are only using it because I'm paying a premium to the normal rates. The conclusion is, what value are we adding? What it did is it generated a lot of traffic on the app. What it did is we developed a lot of, it gave us data, but monetizing it was challenging.
Okay.
And at some point we were losing $1 million a month. And although a lot of investors were pushing me to grow further, not think of the unit economics, not think of the bottom line, just grow, I resisted that thought at the time. And I said, and I have to admit that I've always been a strong believer of providing financial services to the unbanked. And it's something that I had a lot of experience in, and coupling this with technology and providing loans for businesses, loans for consumers, providing payment services for tens and tens of millions of Egyptians made much more sense at the time. And at that point, I embarked on the journey of putting a lot of the initiatives and companies I had created, including Halan, under one umbrella, M&T Halan.
And just, Manish, I want to zoom into this moment because I think it's very pivotal in how the company changed. And I think it's very interesting to get a founder's perspective. You have some of your backers telling you, go, don't worry about unit economics now. At that point, you had successfully raised some money, so fine, there is a cash burn, but it's not a huge issue at that point still. You embark on this pivot, essentially, and taking a risk. I want to hear first, what were your backers telling you when you gave them your new version 2.0? What was the reaction?
It wasn't a very straightforward pitch. So I remember it was August, September of 2019. And I had been trying month over month to reduce incentives, work on my pricing, and it wasn't coming in. And I had a big conversation with Ahmed. And I told him, Ahmed, look, there is no back-end processing system in Egypt that can support millions of people pinging it simultaneously. So what I want you to start working on is a back-end system for lending that can scale. But at that point, it was a big decision, because what I did is I cut spending on ride-hailing. We started growing our tech team to solve for lending.
Yeah.
Simultaneously, I was having conversations with the new investors with the investors of every company I had established previously, because I was trying to put them under one umbrella, and it wasn't an easy endeavor. Some of the VCs that were taking part of the Halan round, some pulled out and some doubled down. Okay. So I got different messages. Some of the VCs that were in some of the smaller VCs had me pitch to their LPs. So I wasn't even pitching to the VCs. I was pitching to the LPs my idea, and
to explain
to them what I see in the market. And really, one had to have a leap of faith, because back then I just saw how it should be, and I had to let everyone see it, and it wasn't there yet. And basically, the tech team spent about 18 months building Neuron, our back-end loan tracking payment processing software. And then from a corporate point of view, I had to bring in new investors, bigger investors that believed in uniting everything together, and they supported us in this deal. And if I didn't have these big checks, it would have been quite complicated. And it's important to say that I got hit with COVID, or the whole world got hit with COVID in 2020. So imagine September 2019, I embark on the pivot, and I get hit with so it's been a hell of a ride. It's been an exciting ride, I have to admit. It's been an exciting ride.
So you are building the back end of this Neuron. You are uniting all the front ends essentially under one umbrella. But now you're not starting from scratch, right? In other words, you have a database of unbanked that you can now go to and show this thing, right? It's not like you're building the back end and a pure startup, and now day one you're coming to Hashem and saying, would you be interested in a loan? You have already a market, a captive audience. You just have to kind of transfer them onto this new platform. Am I right?
So basically, a number of things are happening, right? So the back end is one solution, because it's proprietary developed. It's like linking you to your banking system, right? So you can see your account, you can see how much you owe, when's your next installment. If you want to make a payment, you can make a payment, whether it's person to person, peer to peer, or you're paying a bill, or it's cash in, cash out. All these services you can do. But what was special is that we also worked on the back end and the user app. So in the user app, we have an e-commerce platform where you can use your consumer finance limit to buy stuff on it. We've linked offline to thousands of merchants where you can pay using your Halan consumer finance limit at these merchants who are offline, but they have a vendor app. So in terms of tech products, what we're really creating is an ecosystem that includes a user app, a merchant app. We even have an app for loan officers. So we have tens of thousands of loan officers who have a loan officer app. And and we're working on all things that have to do with banking, right? So lending, payments, saving we can't do directly because we don't have a license from the CBE.
You're not regulated.
But there only banks can do savings. But now there is new regulation that could allow us and might allow us. We're also working on consumer financing, buy now, pay later, supply chain financing, disrupting specific supply chains in specific industries. We've got hundreds of, so in our history, we've had financial transactions with more than 4 million Egyptians. Active, we've got 800,000, 900,000 active borrowers. So you're talking about a scale that's quite big in Egypt.
We're seeing more and more startups these days explore and break away from the traditional ways of finance. This is opening up a new facet of financial support for consumers. This is something I'd spoken about on a previous episode with Rajal Mazroui, who, as an executive VP of DIFC's FinTech Hive, was overseeing a Dubai-based accelerator that helps startups do just that.
The program was designed to to identify, first of all, the challenges of the financial institutions in this region. And at the same time, scan the global map and see what developments are actually happening at the global scale. And this was the main idea of bringing the local banks, the regional banks, and the global banks. And once we agree that these are the priorities for this region, we as FinTech Hive start scouting and looking for the startups all over the world that would be able to solve these problems.
So give us a sense, what are these priorities? Yeah, just to get a sense.
So payments is a very popular area because, as you can see today, and post-COVID, everyone is switching to digital, contactless, cashless type of payments. And to get the bank to actually offer these facilities takes them a very long time. So it's best for them to collaborate or partner with a FinTech who already have this amazing technology with amazing user experience interface that anyone in the market would just download on the phone and do the transaction and have the bank in the background to support the regulatory element or the functional element. So this is the power of the FinTech. Other areas where regulatory requirements, for example, the KYC on the blockchain was a very popular challenge that I am so proud of. One of the startups that came to our program in 2017 has been able to solve and is already working with more than 10 financial institutions in the UAE doing their KYC on the blockchain.
When we come back, we'll continue our conversation with Mounir about the changes facing the loan sector and how much of a challenge this poses to a business like Halan. That's right after the short break. Welcome back. I'm Hashem and Mounir, and you're listening to the Lighthouse Conversations with our guest, Mounir Nakhla. Can I just put here a few scenarios forward that I think are important? And this is by no means takes away from what you've done, which I think is very impressive. And the back end that you're building, I think will probably, I want to ask a few questions about that in a minute in terms of its final usage. But before I go into that, I want to put forward the scenario which we're in now, where you have rising interest rates, inflation across the world, and of course in Egypt, on top of that, also potential, already a mini devaluation of the Egyptian pound and maybe more. When you look at some of the models globally, I mean, everything that's growth's come under attack in public markets, even in private markets. But the buy now, pay later models, the firms of the world, so to speak, have been especially under attack and the upstarts and so on, people are concerned that in a rising rate environment, all of a sudden, the going is tougher. You're going to see more defaults. Consumers will start defaulting. They have taken on more debt they can afford, et cetera, et cetera. Is the macroeconomic environment a concern for you? And if so, how do you not hedge, but protect yourself in that kind of environment?
So, Hashem, let me tell you that we are very, very resilient to the macroeconomic environment. So, our model is the average loan size is hedged to inflation, or it's correlated to inflation. Okay. So as prices go up, the businesses need more working capital, the consumer needs more money, and therefore they get bigger loan sizes, and we make a lot more interest income from our loans. So this is number one. Number two, our model is very different to your typical buy now, pay later model abroad in terms of margins. So what your typical company would do abroad is that they would tell the customer money was typically for free. So interest rates were 0%, 1%, 2%. They would get a merchant rebate, let's say 5%, 6%, 7%, and they would make that spread. With a rising interest rate, the margin on the products do not increase. So they're just eating up from their margins.
Yeah, it shrunk.
It shrunk. So me from day one, Egypt's cost of funds are in the 9-10%. So anyway, your merchant rebate will never cover your cost of funds. So from the very, very onset, my focus is I'm going to do it with very, very positive unit economics. So I coupled buy now, pay later by getting merchant rebates. I was getting merchant rebates together with a consumer finance product where I'm getting interest from consumers. And the NIMs are very, very healthy. And the cost of risk is very, very low.
So by NIMs, just for our listeners, you mean net interest margin, which is essentially the spread between the borrowing and the lending. Fine. Now, do you take anything on your own balance sheet? In other words, are any of these loans show up on your company, or is that offloaded? You are just the middleman taking a spread.
So basically, we're offloading. So basically, we've just signed a securitization that will probably hit the news quite soon. And we're offloading
those loans. You're packaging those loans and then selling them off, essentially.
Correct. So we're offload. So we have a loan book of about $600 million in total, and we're offloading it. We signed a securitization to offload it all over a number of consecutive transactions.
It looks like a very resilient model, like you said, clearly successful. What keeps you up at night? So what worries you?
So I have a 3-year-old. He keeps on coming into our room and he keeps me up at night. But other than that, I'm very, very bullish. And I think combining technology with positive unit economics, with high profitability, with operational scalability is quite a unique proposition. And these types of companies will be very, very special in the new world. So 2022 is not 2021, and it's certainly not 2019. So I think we are very, very well positioned for the new world.
Do you see yourself borrowing a page from Jeff Bezos or from Amazon, where they typically have taken a cost center, and they build the product, and then they turned it into a revenue center? What I mean by that is you've now built, or are building, in fact, a very elaborate back-end system for, let's call it, financial processing, right? And transactions across the entire financial services value chain. Is there a possibility that this would be something you'd offer to outside customers? So in other words, if I'm
certainly.
Okay.
Certainly. So we are in a conversation with one of the medium-sized banks in Egypt, and I'm not talking about a lending company or a payment company. I'm talking about a bank,
commercial bank,
to use our back-end software. So there's a lot to be done there, and I think we can capitalize a lot on that.
So this, is a bit of like reminiscent of what we've seen with something like AWS at Amazon, right? It started as a cost center because they needed the data. They needed the data rooms for their own services, and eventually they essentially built a business around it that they're offering that same service of cloud service essentially to outside customers. Now, do you think that if you do something similar here, inshallah, it becomes the AWS in and by itself? But because to me, intuitively, the first customer is very important, because if you can get a commercial bank or medium-sized commercial bank, reputable bank, to use your service and come back and say, you know what, this service really works and scales, all of a sudden, many others that may not want to take the risk are able to tick that box to their compliance officers, technology officers, board, etc., and come on board. Do you envisage that kind of process?
Certainly. It's something that certainly might unfold.
Walk me through some of the other challenges. For example, talent. how easy is it to find? I mean, you need an army of engineers, but you also need the business development officers or salespeople. You need all sorts of type of people. I mean, how do you go about doing your recruitment?
So we've been on a hiring spree. Ahmed typically likes to onboard and recruit fresh graduates. He thinks it's better to mold them and form them in the way he likes to program. We've got about 100 tech engineers today. It's not that straightforward. So talent is scarce. They're being, however, I have to admit that our churn is very, very, very low. So all the people that started with us are still with us, and that's.
You think it's because you're giving them a valuable skill, or because it's a pleasant place to work, or because you pay above market, or all of the above, or maybe you pay reasonably? What do you think keeps them?
So I think it's all of the above, but chief amongst them is that they're constantly learning. So they're constantly learning, and that's very, very big for them. And two, I think a lot of them strongly believe in the direction and the vision of the company, which is setting out to do something very unique.
Do they get to participate in the upside? In other words, do you give options or equity out to employees?
Of course. It's one of the, when I introduce them, it's life-changing for even the environment and the culture in the company, because every person feels he's a shareholder. Every person feels he's a partner. So the greater good will always become a priority to individual goals. So jealousy becomes less, competition becomes less, collaboration becomes more, communication becomes better, because they're all working for a common goal. It becomes one team.
Understood. And within let's call it a super app, within a super app model, you've talked to me now about the FinTech piece, and that is very important. Presumably, if you've got my attention and I interact with your app several times a day as it is, you want to sell me other things. So what else is there that's up on your priority list?
Okay, so obviously, this is something that we're constantly working on and constantly solving for, right? Because getting you on the app once a week or once a month is not as good as getting you on the app every day.
100%.
The e-commerce platform, we've seen a lot of engagement and repeat engagement on the platform, especially once you have a limit of spending that you can use there. Bill payments is also a regular use case. Peer-to-peer transfer is a regular use case. And we attempted a game.
Gamification, okay.
A game, just a game. We attempted a game in Ramadan, and that was a big, big, big success. So everyone who played the game again and again and again.
What's the game?
It's a trivia game.
Okay.
Q&A.
Okay.
So he played it again and again and again. And what we realized, we got 30% conversion into commerce, loans, and payments.
And did you charge for the game, or was it for free?
The game's for free.
Okay.
On the contrary, so we gave prizes for the game.
Okay.
If you are number 1, 2, or 3, you get a prize. And now the game is... So it was just an experiment, and I believe it was very, very successful. Now we took it off the app, and we're coming in with the 2.0 of the game in June. So it's just something that we're playing around with, because ride-hailing was creating a lot of engagement of the app. It keeps the app top of mind, regular use case, daily usage. And what we started doing is we pulled the plug from ride-hailing on the 1st of March. And that's what we were doing, substituting ride-hailing with something where you don't lose money, which is a game. And that as an experiment, I have to admit that was very, very successful.
And ride-hailing will no longer be part of your app?
No longer. Took us 2 years, 2 years to be able to do
I
that.
can imagine. I mean, it must be difficult decision. Ultimately, it's one of your babies, right? I mean, but I think there's also obviously prioritization, and there's scarcity value in terms of real estate, ultimately, on the app. If you look at places like your friends in Indonesia, like the PayPals of the world, I mean, there's some direction of some markets that are more developed from a tech perspective than we are. Do you take those as your kind of lead when you're thinking about what else to put on the app, or what else could work? Or are you trying to solve for problems that are potentially, very much symptomatic of our region, let's say Egypt and beyond? We'll talk about the beyond in a minute.
So obviously we need to know what's happening around the world. Every country has its own specifics, and what we try to nail is we have a very, very clear strategy, and the strategy is to create an ecosystem around providing financial solutions for unbanked and underbanked. And we look at 3 levels, so consumer, retailer, and wholesaler. And our solutions are all revolving around them and their day-to-day interactions. So the more we study them, and then of course there are sector specific. So there are specific sectors that we are now investing more and more in them, whether through M&A or directly. So we're getting more and more sector specific. So, but the more you create this digital ecosystem, the harder it is for the person or the entity to leave the ecosystem.
Are you eyeing particular markets outside of Egypt?
We are.
Is there anything you can disclose, or something you're still working on?
There is one country in Asia, similar demographic, larger population.
That was my question. Is that what you look for? You solve for a similar demographic?
I'm looking for, I'm looking for a similar demographic. So it's the numbers, right? We want to get to the numbers. So Egypt, we have 105, 110 million people, most of which are underbanked or unbanked. So we're looking at Africa, East and West, and there are specific targets. Our strategy is mostly through M&A, but possibly through greenfield as well.
If we pivot to 1 second here and talk about Mounir for a quick minute, if you look at yourself as a founder and as a CEO of a company, what do you rate as your strengths and what are your weaknesses? In other words, I mean, I can go on and on about myself if you're ever interested, but it's for another podcast, about the things that I think I'm good at doing day to day, running a company, and the things that I frankly would rather not do, or maybe I'm forced to do in the early stages of the company, but eventually want to outsource. How do you see yourself in that regard? I mean, where are the areas that you feel most comfortable with? Is it more strategy, business development, fundraising, or more the nitty-gritty day-to-day operations, or a combination of the two?
I think one of my strengths are finding the gap in the market, finding the corner, seeing what needs to be done to different users or companies. So I think I'm good with that. Scanning the market and seeing what we can do to fill that gap. I think I am good at communication. So whether creating a culture and communication. So this is within the company and
to the external
also
world.
To the external world.
With
so
your stakeholders.
I think this is communication is important. Before getting into the weaknesses, I think another strength I think I have is delegation. So organization structure and delegation. Building a company is a very dynamic thing, right? So the company I started in 2010 is not 2015, is not 2018, it's not 2022, and it's not 2030. So it's very dynamic. So it needs constant change. And I like driving change and I like driving growth. So what excites me is growing. The minute we start stagnating or on any business line, I get depressed. You know, it's emotional.
I know the feeling.
Yeah, I like just keep on growing and growing and growing. It's something healthy, in a healthy manner. what I'm less comfortable with doing, or my weaknesses is becoming very, very technical on a specific subject matter. So, and this is where the team comes in, and where this is where they help a lot in every technical issue, in giving a lot of time to something that's too detailed, and someone else can pay attention to that.
Yeah, and frankly, that's not the job. I mean, you're not paid to do that, right? You're not paid to go too super granular in a particular technical issue. You should grasp the main pieces, and that's it.
Responding to emails, that's a weakness of mine. I'm not good at responding to emails. So
this entire conversation has been on WhatsApp, or else I bombard you with a call. But I have my own tricks.
So that's another weakness of mine.
Okay.
I'm sure there are lots and lots of other weaknesses.
Curious, and
I'm sure there are lots of other weaknesses.
Yeah, I mean, look, I just wanted to get and give our listeners an overall sense of the kind of personality, because obviously it's something we all go through. Now, on a day-to-day, I mean, obviously you have a co-founder or a partner that you work with closely. It seems that you guys have a nice divide in terms of him being more on the technical side, you being more on the strategic / operation side. Do you have a coterie of people that you speak to in terms of big picture? Is it your board? Is it a particular person? Do you just listen to your own inner voice, a combination of the above? How do you make big strategic decisions?
I listen to a lot of people.
Okay.
So in the company,
that's
outside
the strength.
The company.
That's a big strength.
So I'm always soliciting people's opinions and feedback on the direction I'm taking.
I think that's a big source of strength, if you ask me. Not everybody's willing to solicit feedback. And how do you then distill that feedback to make a decision? Because obviously you'll get different people telling me different things, and people, as we both know, are not short of opinions, and especially our friends. So you get a lot of opinions. How do you then distill it to the essence?
So basically, I like to sleep over it. Time is of an essence. I don't like to take big decisions quickly. And I like to make big decisions at a time when I'm calm. So after a meditation session, after a run, after a gym session, so I like to do it, the big decisions, and it could be after a week of vacation where I make the big decisions.
Yeah.
So one needs to calm the mind. Think of the mind as water. If it's a rough sea, and think of a stone with its ripples as the thought. If you throw the stone in a rough sea, you can't see all the ripples. But if it's a still pond and you throw a stone in it, you can see all the ripples that will come from it. So I like throwing the thought in a calm mind.
And how on earth do you create a calm mind living in Cairo and being in that business? That's not an easy feat. So what are your escape mechanisms for calmness? Please tell me. So, as long as it's legal. If it's illegal, I don't want to know. But anything else, I'm happy to listen.
They're all very, very legal. So
no, I'm serious, because I think that's an important point. You're very right. I mean, being calm and making decisions not when you're agitated is key. But in a business like yours, that's very difficult.
I've been practicing a Chinese sport that's called Tai Chi and Qigong, and they help me enormously. And then all the other typical stuff. So
working
out, trying to leave Cairo every other week, go to somewhere where you have clean air and good nature. I love nature, physical exercise, mobility, so on and so forth.
All right. One last question, Mounir, that I have for you. So, do you see yourself always wanting to build? Because there is a possibility that you succeed to the point where this company becomes a large company that is not growing at 50% a year, but has a number of profitable divisions that sort of run comfortably at a lower growth rate that's more mature.
It's not going to happen. It's not going to happen. we're going to continue growing at 50+% year over year.
Okay. Well, I think if you do, then your investors will be very happy, and I'll be very happy for you as well.
It's my job to make them happy, and above all, make you happy, Hashem.
Music to my ears. Mounir, it's been fascinating. We wish you all the best of luck. Honestly, congratulations to all of the success you guys have had. It's a great story, and can't wait to check in again on the next podcast in a year or two to have another conversation with you and hear where everything's gone. Thank you.
Thank you, Hashem. It's been much enjoyed it. Thanks a lot.
Thank you very much. All the best. Best of luck.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us on the Lighthouse Conversations with me, Hashem and Mounir. We're produced by Chirag Desai, and our content director is Farah Al-Sharif. If you've enjoyed this episode, please follow us on your favorite podcast player so you don't miss any upcoming episodes. Also, feel free to browse our extensive collection of previous episodes, which you can find in any of your podcast players, including Apple, Spotify, and Google Podcasts. You can find us on Instagram at thelighthouse_AE or send us an email at connect@thelighthouse.ae. And please share a link with your friends if you've enjoyed this episode. We'll see you again in 2 weeks.